Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's event, Achieving Work-Life Balance as a Black Professional. I'm Jenny Okolo. I'm your BYP Healthcare Chapter Lead, and I will be your host tonight. I'm super excited to be joined by Chris Frederick, founder of Project Soul Stride, who will be sharing his personal journey and practical strategies for balancing a demanding career with health and wellness. Next slide, please. So moving on to today's event agenda, we will have a welcome introduction, rapid fire questions that you can do either live with us or in your own time as well. We'll also have the speaker session with Chris, where I will be asking a series of questions. And then we'll also be going through a group wellness strategy with some sharing techniques on how to maintain your wellness. And then that will be closed with closing remarks to end the session. So this session is all about exploring the unique challenges we face as Black professionals in balancing work demands with health and wellness. By the end, I hope you'll leave with practical tips, techniques to support your health and insights from professionals who have been on this journey. Next slide, please. So before we get into that, I just wanted to let you know a little bit about myself as the new healthcare chapter lead. I am by background an occupational therapist / clinical assessor. My main bulk of my work has been in forensic psychiatry, which basically means working with people with various mental health conditions who have also gone through the criminal justice system. And in addition to that, I also work and support people with neurodiversity and advocate for those who have mental health conditions within the Black community. I'm also a TEDx speaker and founder of SASA Health and Sensory, which is a clinical service where we support people with various neurodevelopmental needs and mental health conditions as well. I'm also the founder of Mind Circle Talks, which is a platform where people can talk freely about all things mental health. So that's just a little bit about my work. And I'm also based in London. So the question, why work-life balance matters for Black professionals. For many Black professionals, work-life balance isn't just a nice to have, but it's a necessity. Beyond typical job stresses, we often navigate additional pressures. For example, representing our communities, managing high expectations, and sometimes being one of few Black voices in our spaces, which I'm sure many of you can relate to. Research even suggests that Black professionals may face greater burnout risk due to the extra emotional labor, microaggressions, and heightened pressure to prove ourselves. This can make maintaining mental and physical wellness in the workplace a real challenge. So in today's session, we'll look at practical ways that we can utilize to protect and prioritize our well-being amid all these demands. We'll explore those strategies to nurture both our careers and health. And again, like I said, we'll be hearing from Chris later on. So just going back in terms of the two different areas that I've mentioned, unique pressures in the workplace, I can talk from my experience where oftentimes I am the only Black voice in the room, especially as, you know, I move up in my career and I start to have more senior roles. And that can often be quite pressurizing in terms of balancing those high expectations. So I'm sure a few of you in whichever career field you are in, you might have also experienced the same thing. And then also just in terms of increased burnout, emotional labor of making sure that we're advocating, which is amazing, it's great. But at the same time, that pressure of being the sole person who carries the load of advocating, carries the load of speaking to our managers and making sure that certain policies are implemented or reflected in a way that benefits you can be quite laborious. And it's something that I've spoken to a lot of people about, whether that's friends and colleagues, about how do we maintain our well-being while still wanting to advocate for the rights that we have. And then also wellness is essential, it's not optional. And this is really key because mental and physical well-being are foundational for long-term career success, but just in general, they work hand in hand. If you are not mentally well, whether that's due to stress, burnout, it can impact your physical health. You start to see those symptoms, whether that's in terms of you being fatigued, so tired all the time, having certain pains and aches. And actually, there are a few people who have manifested other detrimental physical health problems as a result of not taking care of their mental well-being, and not just not taking care of it. Maybe they are trying to, but the stresses are just way too much. So those are some of the reasons why work-life balance is important. And just a caveat that it's not a case of it being 50-50. I don't think we'll get to a point where we'll 100% have that work-life balance, but it's about being intentional. Okay, next slide, please. So just looking at some facts and figures, apologies, for some reason we do have a little bit crossed out, but I just wanted to highlight some facts and figures about mental health, but more in particular, mental health at work. So according to a Mind survey, 39% of Black professionals in the UK avoid discussing mental health at work out of fear they'll be perceived as less capable or professional. So again, it goes back to the fact of, yes, we are trying to do the work, but actually sometimes it is a lot to talk about your own mental health issues, especially if you feel that maybe you might it might impact the perception of you at work. You might feel like you might lose your job. So there's so many other things to consider. Business in the community research further shows that 30% of Black employees fear that disclosing mental health challenges will harm their career progression, leading many to mask stress or burnout symptoms. So again, very similar to the first one as well. Mental health often hidden says that 39% of Black professionals hesitate to disclose their mental health struggles, fearing perceptions and incompetence. And NHS has also reported that Black people in the UK are less likely to seek mental health support due to stigma and concerns around discrimination in healthcare settings, which can lead to delayed care and worsened outcomes. So we can kind of see a theme here, right, around the stigma that is just generally around mental health, but also how that can impact people in terms of seeking help and support. Whilst the help and support might be there, and you might find that lots of companies are stating that they've got all these well-being initiatives, which is great, how people access that support is also important to ensuring that there is a safe space to be able to do that. Next slide, please. So now onto our rapid fire questions icebreaker. So in the chat or on a piece of paper or in your mind, have a think about what helps you balance work and life. So again, I highlighted balance because obviously, you know, sometimes it's difficult to keep that 50-50 balance, but what is it that helps you maintain a good work-life balance? I can come up with some suggestions. Some people might find an extracurricular activity might work. Some people prefer to just watch TV, read a book. So just have a quick think about that. Thank you very much. So we've got a good afternoon nap helps. Amazing. I love that. So, and this is another thing, you know, oftentimes, again, some people might think that you've got to do something really big or very specific in order to maintain your mental health outside of work, but just having an afternoon nap might just do the job, and that's absolutely fine. So thank you so much for that suggestion. So continue to just have a think about that. I'll go on to the other questions that you can also jot down and have a think about. The next one is, do you usually unplug after work or check emails in your free time? And be honest as well. I can be honest too. I say I should unplug after work, but I don't do that all the time. And yes, I do check my emails in my free time, which again, I should not be doing. But I think it's important to sort of be honest about that and see where you can make those positive changes. Ooh, I can see some here. Netflix and eat. Yep. Perfect. I love to do that as well. What's your favorite way to de-stress after a busy work day? It's very similar to the previous question. So that's another way to look at things. How do you like to de-stress? Going out for walks tends to be a popular one as well. Lots of people joining run clubs, which is great. And then the next bit is, if we can go to the next slide, is do you usually skip lunch and or work late? So it's not just about what you do after work, but even during your working day, how is your structure like? When you are supposed to take lunch, do you tend to skip that because maybe the workload has become too much and you might push it till the latter part of the day, and that part comes and you still don't have enough time, and by the time you know it, you haven't had your lunch? And what I said earlier about physical health and mental health being interlinked, if you're not getting your nutritional needs and you're not taking care of your dietary intake, so not eating enough, not having the right nutrients, that can definitely impact your physical well-being and also your mental well-being. So maybe becoming more fatigued and not having the right vitamins in your system. The next part is, what's your go-to self-care activity during the week? So again, these are all kind of similar questions, but in different formats, just to help you with thinking. Okay. So now, on to the next part. I'll be introducing our speaker, and then afterwards I'll play a short video for you to watch. So Chris is a passionate mental health advocate and expert on Black suicide prevention. Drawing from his own lived experience and nearly 2 decades spent across Asia, Chris brings a unique global perspective to his work. As the principal investigator for Project Soul Stride, Chris is committed to integrating personal narratives into transformative mental health practices. A dedicated speaker and writer, Chris connects with audiences on issues ranging from mental health, equity, to the power of community-driven solutions. Also known for his compelling storytelling, Chris weaves in his love for Star Wars, which I thought was amazing, by the way, as the mental health Jedi, making him a dynamic public speaker. So I definitely have some tips to take from Chris in terms of that. And before I play this video, please note that some of the following topics might address sensitive topics, including suicide and depression. So if you feel that these subjects are triggering, please feel free to step away or adjust your viewing as needed. So I will now take over in sharing. Of my tech again. Okay. And just have a quick listen and watch through this video. There we go. Let me know if you can see my screen, everyone. Someone speak up to let me know, because I can't see everyone else.
I can see it. Play to see if you can hear volume.
Okay.
The first question is, what's it like being a friend of someone with mental illness?
I don't know. I don't think of it like that, because I just think of you as a mate. So it doesn't. I guess I don't think of you like that. So
I got made redundant, and it really, really hit me. I just used to just lie in bed and just used to get depressed, overeat, waste money, and then COVID came, and that's when I decided that, you know, the way out was to attempt suicide. I got admitted into Ealing Hospital. The ward staff were wonderful. The on-duty psychiatrist came to see me, and he said, have you ever reached out to, local community mental health teams or talking therapies? I said, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what this stuff is. He said, well, we're gonna help you now. And for the next 3 months, the community health teams, they'd come to see me 2-3 times a week at home, see I was taking my medication, give me support. And then after that, said, okay, we need to start talking about long-term treatment. Belonging is something that I've realized is essential. Not easy to find that. But I've found it now in a few different ways. I run the LinkedIn Star Wars fans group now, and people seem to enjoy it. So who knows where that might lead us in the future.
Maybe we should have practiced this more. No.
You just have to be patient and just keep exploring, keep looking for alternative options. Just have that belief that once those appointments start coming through, the services are there in whatever shape or form they are there to help you, improve your mental health, your mental well-being.
It's quite relaxing, this, isn't it?
It's very nice.
Something that's really become essential for me is being able to catch up with really good friends like Alper. And I think that if you're lucky enough to find one, even two of those people that can support your mental well-being journey, you're doing very well. You're doing very well.
All right, I'll stop sharing now. And I'll wait for OK to share again. In the meantime, that I've watched this so many times, and every time I'm super inspired, I'm in awe, but I see things through a different lens as well. And I just love the story that you told, Chris. I know this is probably a snapshot of, the entirety of what happened, but the different elements that it gave me in terms of hope, in terms of perspective, and just kind of like how belonging, I think, like you said in the video, and community really helps in one's mental health. So I'd love to go to the next slide and just formally introduce Chris. Thank you so much for joining us and giving up your time to answer a few questions and just sharing your story a little bit more.
You're very welcome.
So I've got a series of questions. My first one, I have to ask, you describe yourself as a mental health Jedi. Can you explain what that means to you and how this approach has shaped your journey, both through depression and also your recovery as well?
Well, the nickname Mental Health Jedi is something that I didn't come up with it. I just want you to know that somebody else came up with it, and it was an author. It was an author that I spoke to several months ago about an idea for a book, and she said, I follow your Project Soulstride page, I follow your LinkedIn feed, I'm a member of your Star Wars fans group, and she said, when I read your work, you've been able to somehow blend lived experience, your life story, with a lighter side of humor coming from elements of the Star Wars universe, making you the mental health Jedi. And I thought, I wrote it down, Jenny, and I circled it. And I thought, I quite like that. So I started to use the hashtag on LinkedIn, And I began to see that people were beginning to reference it in my work. And now, in the various articles that I write, in the blogs that I do, and all that kind of stuff, I get signed off Chris Frederick, mental health Jedi, which I'm going to stick with that. I think that's pretty good.
Yeah.
But what does it mean to me? I mean, listen, you know, this is going to be viewed by a lot of folks, hopefully, who are a great few years younger than me. You know, I have more years behind me than I have ahead of me now. I'm in my mid-50s, and when I think about the life journey that I've been on, has been quite unique. In the, you know, growing up in inner city London, as a twin to young Caribbean parents, born in 1970, living, you know, on the Chalk Hill estate, which was one of the roughest estates in southeast England, during the first 10 years of my life. And then moving from that environment into the suburbs of Kent, where we lived on Elmstead Avenue and went to Kemnal Manor School, where Colin and I were two of five non-white pupils in the entire school. And we were the only ethnic family on Elmstead Avenue. So you could only imagine back in the early 80s to mid 80s, Jenny, what that might have felt like, what that might have meant to us as a family. And going through those challenges ultimately took its toll on the family, in that my mother and father split up. And it was a tragic separation that almost split the entire family in two, in that I had to make a decision one night which of the two parents I was going to go with, my father, where my twin was staying, or leave in a taxi and go back to Wembley, where my mum was returning. And you know, for a 13-year-old boy, that experience, that level of trauma, still sits with me today, even 40 years later. And I don't think it will ever disappear. I eventually decided to stay with my father, and that was the best of two, of you know, of a bad choice, I would say. Fast forward to, you know, leaving school, I got kicked out of school. Colin was a naturally gifted student. He became head boy. He became the top academic in the school. I, on the other hand, was a troublemaker. I used to get beaten by my father for poor grades. The teachers used to pick on me. Eventually, I got kicked out of school at the age of 17, with no qualifications. Went into work, and then just got into sales pretty early on, because that was the lowest hanging fruit for somebody at that age with little or no qualifications. So I got into sales, and I realized that I was naturally a gifted communicator and a salesperson. So I started to sort of carve my way through that, and got
Yeah.
into the recruitment industry. And then that's what took me to Asia. The year 2000, I turned 30, and I arrived in Hong Kong on the eve of Chinese New Year, Y2K. And that was the beginning of my new life.
Okay. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing your journey and your upbringings as well, because I think that's quite important, because like you rightly said, I mean, it still might affect you till now, and it doesn't matter how long ago some of these traumatic aspects of, you know, one's life has been. I think it's important to note that it can still stay with you. But thank you so much for sharing your journey. You know, I wanted to know, I know you work, looking at your profile and on LinkedIn, you have worked with numerous organizations, including Mind, which is the video that we've just watched that you did in collaboration with. What role do you think that these organizations play in addressing mental health issues, especially within the Black community, seen as that's, you know, something that you've mentioned in terms of your upbringing?
Yeah. No, it's a highly complex field. I mean, Project Soul Stride was set up essentially to conduct an independent investigative review of the mental health and suicide prevention marketplace in England, with a very strong focus on what provisions are in place to support the needs of Black people, in particularly Black men, going through suicide ideation. And over the course of the last 15 months, I've had the opportunity to speak to over 180 individuals across the UK, most of which are very senior decision makers and policy makers across public sector, academia, the third sector, what we call the charity sector, NHS systems, NHS mental health trusts, talking therapies. And it's no surprise that a number of glaringly obvious themes are very clear to me. One, there is a lack of senior Black leadership within the entire sector. You will see pockets of grassroots organisations in certain parts of the UK, maybe in the Midlands, that are doing fabulous work, like Black Minds Matter, like IIT Mind, and so on and so forth. They're Black run. They've been set up by individuals like myself who have been through their own lived experience, and they're serving the needs of their local communities, and they're doing tremendous work. But if you were to look beyond that, and that's a very small percentage of the industry, if you look at the massive side of the industry, let's say 85 to 90%, it's dominated by white stakeholders. And so, I spend my time, doing what I call speaking truth to power. And that is putting people on the spot and making them feel more accountable for the needs of the Black community. I am seeing good evidence of strong activity. There's PCREF, the Patient Carer Race Equality Framework, which was started last September by Jackie Dwyer and Claire Murdoch at NHS England. And that is going to become mandatory as of April next year, where every single NHS mental health trust in the country has to show evidence that they have a process in place to tackle racism, both within the rank and file, right through to the way in which they deal with patients. There's also the Black Mental Health Manifesto movement, which I'm also part of, which is a very much a policy-driven activity. I have a slight advantage, Jenny, in that because I came back from the UK only 4 or 5 years ago. I haven't been, because I only returned here in 2020. So I've been away for 20 years. And I think that's probably a blessing because it means that I don't necessarily have the historical damage, the historical negative thoughts about the NHS, about the mental health industry in the UK. Because if I did, I probably wouldn't be doing the work I'm doing now. So I sort of dropped in just recently, and what I've been able to do is to use my transferable skills from the private sector into the lived experience space, and that's meant that I've been able to work with some amazing organisations and write for some amazing people. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And I think what I'll do afterwards is either in the chat or to everyone who signed up, we can, because you've mentioned quite a few statements about what's coming up, to just let people know, because I think that's really important because it affects everybody, at the end of the day. And I think it's great that we are aware of that.
Yes.
You've been very open with your struggles with depression. And I just wanted to ask, what advice would you offer to Black professionals who are going maybe through similar challenges, especially given the cultural and societal pressures that we face? So within like the workplace, for example, I think what I mentioned before earlier on in the presentation was, yes, there might be some mental health initiatives that are present in the workplace, but actually what are the consequences sometimes? And I guess I have to use the word consequences of maybe disclosing that you have a mental health condition, or there's something going on, or you want to access services. So just some advice around that, because I know that can be quite tricky for some people.
No, it is. I mean, let me first share with you some helpful data, Jenny, in addition to the great data that you showed earlier, because I spoke at an event in Asia earlier in the year. And let me give you some idea of the global picture of poor work mental health. Very, very interesting. 13% of the global population suffer from some kind of mental health issue. That equates to 12 billion working days being lost each year due to depression and anxiety, which we call in the world of therapy low intensity, base level mental health issues. 48% of Gen Zs say they feel stressed, and 2.5 trillion US dollars is the cost to the world economy from poor mental health every single year. Now that is that is extraordinary when you look at it from a global perspective. And going back to your question, I mean, you also have to bear in mind that I'm not in the workplace at the moment. But what I will do though is that I will reflect on, as I answer your question, I will reflect on some of the challenges that I faced and how I try to deal with them. And I'm not saying that I was successful, because I attempted suicide after a significant loss, which was redundancy and a mental health breakdown. So that is a cautionary tale. And I say that because 1 in 4 people in the UK have a mental health problem. 1 in 7 people will have some form of suicide ideation. That those 2 points of data tell me that who's ever listening to this interview, this talk, needs to think about what I call the 3 C's: collaborate, connect, and communicate. And I say that because if you take communicate, the three most dangerous words in the human vocabulary are "I am okay." They are very dangerous words, because so many people will answer that question without even thinking, but actually they're not okay.
Yeah,
right?
Very true.
I call you now, Joe. I say, Jenny, how are you? And you say, I'm okay, Chris.
Yeah.
It's just right. It's just so natural. But actually inside you might be feeling pretty crappy, right? And so I'd call they're very dangerous words. The 3 most hopeful words are "I need help." The ability to make a decision that you need help and that you are going to reach out to a friend, a colleague, a family member, and you are going to own your mental health challenge, knowing that you are not alone. That by very nature of those data points, you will never ever be alone. And if a manager or a colleague looks shocked, surprised, or even disappointed, you must just continue to say to yourself, there are probably 3 or 4 other people in our team who may also be facing mental health troubles, but they haven't spoken about it in the same way that I have. So you must own that story, and you must be willing to be brave and vulnerable in connecting, finding others who may share similar issues, collaborate with them, create your internal networks, and communicate your story in the best way you can without putting yourself at undue risk. And I recognize that it might have an impact on your promotional prospects or so on and so forth. But what I will say to you is that more and more CXO level executives, due to COVID in particular, have actually come out quite openly, and they are themselves talking about their own mental health challenges.
Yeah.
So if it's coming from the top down and coming from the bottom up, then there's hope. Everybody should be able to talk about it, and it should be able to become almost common language.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's such an amazing answer, and there's so many points you've covered. And absolutely, when you ask somebody, "How are you? You all right?" Yeah, that's the automatic response. Yes, I'm fine. You know, everything's okay.
Yes.
And I love the point that you touched on in terms of a lot of people are going to be going through things.
Yes.
Your colleagues, but they just might not say anything.
Yeah.
And I think now we're moving into an era where more and more people are being open, which is great. And
Yes.
especially seeing senior leaders, CEOs, like you've just mentioned, talking
Yes.
about their mental health, hopefully will give people the confidence to know that actually it's not all that bad, admitting and telling somebody that, yes, you are struggling. And another thing is just sometimes it's all about having that safe space, isn't it?
Yes.
So perhaps that first line of contact may not be your manager. It may be your colleague. It may be
Yes.
somebody who you've built a good relationship with.
Yes.
So I'm so glad that you've touched on those different points, because I think it's important to recognize that some people might not have the confidence to go straight to the support system that they've got at work. But if in their network, in the relationships that they've built around with people, if they can find someone to confide in, that's the best first step that someone can take.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, also,
Yeah.
let me also share with you, because I think that what you're saying is spot on, but I also think about if the conversation can start in the home before it reaches the office, that hopefully will give the individual some level of confidence that they can also tackle the conversation at work. So let me share with you, Jenny, you're familiar with the Voice newspaper, right? The UK's largest black newspaper. And in 2023, they did a study on black mental health. And let me share with you some really interesting insights here. 68% of participants confirmed that they or their family have faced mental health challenges. 81 feel or felt the mental health support for black people in Britain is inadequate. Younger black Brits are more willing to engage with mental health services than older generations like me. And 87% say that mental health, and this is the really important one, Jenny, 87% say that mental health is not discussed enough at home, with stigma and fear being major barriers.
Yeah.
So you can imagine that if you're facing those challenges at home, no wonder people are afraid to talk about it at work, right? So I think that if you're part of a family, try to find somebody to talk to, and then when you talk to somebody at work, it might be a little bit easier.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think, you know, the conversation hopefully can start home for some people who do have that network at home. I recognize that not everybody might have that.
Of course.
And also, it might not look like a family per se, maybe your friends outside of work.
Yes.
But yes, absolutely. The stigma around mental health, as much as mental health is being spoken about now, which is great, there is
Yes.
still that stigma.
Yes.
And I understand how that could, I guess, push people away from talking about their mental health at work as well. And something else that I wanted to sort of mention as well, just to give people, again, a greater picture of the fact that they are not alone. So as I mentioned at the start, I am a therapist, a psychiatric therapist. And in my all years since I qualified and, you know, been working in psychiatric hospitals, I've met people from all walks of life. And that was the thing that stood out to me. I've met people who are magic circle lawyers to those who are massive entrepreneurs. And one thing that stood out to me was that nobody is exempt from having poor mental health. Not one person, myself included. Okay, so I think the main thing is just taking away that shame, you know, the shame from maybe being burnt out or maybe not being mentally there at work and feeling that, oh, I should be able to do this. No, like sometimes you do get to that point where things get too much and you might need to pause or take a step back. So it's absolutely fine to get that help. And outside of family, outside of social networks, of course, contacting your local GP. There's so many resources as well, like some of the ones that Chris has mentioned that are online that do offer sort of practical tips in terms of supporting your mental health. But the main thing is that you are not alone in this. And it's just important to just recognize that before it gets to a point where, it might just be detrimental. So thank you so much. I'm just aware of time, and I know you've got to leave soon.
We're doing okay. We're doing okay for time, aren't we?
Yeah, I think you need to leave.
No, just carry on. I'm enjoying the conversation.
Okay, good. I love that. If anyone, by the way, has any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. And I'm sure Chris, he's sticking around, so he'll be able to answer them for you. So my next question, or maybe rather a statement as well, is, again, it's not just about the workplace, but just in general, like when talking about, if somebody has had a crisis, for example, whether they've been in hospital or they've had to take time out of work, sometimes that can, I guess, might feel a bit debilitating, like, oh, how do I get myself back up? I want to know, with your experience and the things that you've gone through, how did you manage to sort of get back on your feet and be involved in all these initiatives? Like, what gave you the strength to do so? I know you said you traveled at 30, and I guess maybe that was that change, that pivotal point. But just to give some of our listeners here some encouragement as well.
Yeah, listen, this is probably the most difficult question to answer, Jenny, because I'm always brutally honest about this when people ask me. I have not found the answer. That is why we're talking, because I am a man of lived experience. I'm a suicide survivor, twice over. I've been through 52 hours of therapy in 3 years. I continue my therapeutic journey. It is an ongoing journey as I uncover more things that I need to resolve and deal with. And I guess, when I woke up from my second suicide attempt at Ealing Hospital, it was at that very moment that I looked into. My mum was there. I didn't know she had arrived at the hospital. My friend had called her. And when I woke up, she was holding my hand. And this is a 70-odd-year-old woman from Grenada who never thought for a second that her firstborn son would ever be in this situation. And I looked up at her, and it was at that moment I realized that I had something to live for. And I made a solemn promise that would be the second and last time that I would attempt such a thing. And when I made that decision, Jenny, it was like, I don't know how to describe it, really, like a switch came on, or like a weight had been lifted, because I'd been hiding my mental health condition from my mum for the longest time. And it was easy for me to do that because I was living in Asia, so I was only ever seeing her twice a year, or not even that. I'd only fly back to London once every 2 years, so I might have seen her for a day or two every 24 months. So she had no idea. She thought that I was living the life of Riley. I was traveling, all over the world doing business development, 5-star hotels, which I was. But what she didn't realize is all of that was having a dramatic impact on me, both mentally and physically.
Okay.
When I made a decision, I put my life, in the hands of professionals. I had to make a decision to trust someone, and it was the NHS. They knew what my issues were. I allowed them to guide me. I allowed them to signpost me. I wouldn't say that all their recommendations were successful, but the fact is that if I didn't open myself up to those possibilities, I probably wouldn't be here today.
Mm.
So it was about having a reason to live. It was about finding hope again
Yeah.
and making a decision to stay alive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. That's really touching. And what kept on, I guess, going through my mind is the importance of having what we would call it, let's say, as health professionals, is protective factors. And your protective factor was many things, but of course, including your mother, and which in turn gave you that hope, and yeah, you've touched on so many sort of points, and the fact that this journey and this recovery is also ongoing. And I think that's a very good way to and realistic way to put it, because I think oftentimes people might think, oh, I go to therapy, or if I'm medication, it's a quick fix. I should be fine by in 6 months' time. But actually, the journey of making sure that you are taking care of your mental health and well-being is ongoing. Is something that you have to be proactive at every single day, which is what I can see is what you're doing. And there's going to be some days where it doesn't matter how proactive you are, that you just might just have down days, and that's again absolutely fine and normal. But it's essentially about having those protective factors, whether that is your family, your friends, if you've got children, if there's a particular thing that you might enjoy, that kind of keeps you hoping for the future. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Absolutely.
And I hope that has sort of inspired and also gotten people to think a bit more about, yes, you might have gone through something super traumatic, not just for yourself, but perhaps for others as well, like other members of your family, but it is not the end. And it's just an ongoing process. So thank you so much for sharing that.
And it's also interesting, Jenny, if I might also add, there were two things that you said at the outset which really resonated with me. One of them was being the first and only, often in the environments that we move in, and the other thing was about imposter syndrome. And just to give you an up to the minute example of when people listen to me talk or see me publicly or online, they might be of the impression, oh, Chris is cured. Chris is fine now. He doesn't need any more mental health support because he's now, quote unquote, an advocate. So he must have already been through his recovery journey. But quite the opposite. I mean, I only decided to move into the world of lived experience last year, so I'm still quite new to it. But it's been an accelerated curve this year. And just last week, I was the keynote speaker at the annual general meeting for the BACP. And I can tell you, Jenny, because I've got no reason to bluff or lie to anybody anymore. That's one decision I have made, by the way. Never pretend to be anything you're not anymore, because the only person who's ever going to judge you is yourself. If you give the power to other people to judge you, that's a fatal mistake. So don't ever do that. But last week I spoke at the event on Thursday, and I can tell you, Jenny, from the Sunday night to the Thursday morning, I was physically like sick. I was so, the adrenaline was so high, the fear factor and the imposter syndrome was so intense that I could barely eat, I could barely get out of bed, and right up until the night before, I was thinking of all the possible reasons why I could cancel this keynote presentation. So I was thinking, what's the best excuse I could use? My dog's sick, or a car ran over my foot at the bus stop, so I can't walk. I was thinking about all the possible excuses. But you know what? On the day itself, I got out of bed early. I did some breathing exercises. I did my vagus nerve massage, right, which was really cool. I listened to some great R&B music. I turned it right up so that I was just getting, and then I had a lovely shower with I gave myself a facial. I put on my new Star Wars t-shirt, which is the same as this one, but in black. This, if you don't know, Mandalorian, of course, this is Kroll from Mandalorian, and that's the t-shirt you're seeing on the screen. And I turned up at this event, and I felt so much better once I got there. And the board member who did the Q&A with me, much like you, Jenny, she was wonderful. And we sat on stage. We sat on stage in front of 50 people, 700 more people watching online. And 45 minutes later, I got up and I just gave a big fist pump, as if to say, I got through it. I gave myself a great pat on the back and say, that was not easy. Well done. You did it. Just keep going. And that's what I keep saying. Whenever you've got a challenge, you're going to face fear. You're going to have to dig in, but you're going to have to make a decision. Am I going to do this or not? And that's a decision that I made last week. And I'm so glad that I did it.
Oh, amazing. So proud. That's such a wonderful sort of full circle moment from feeling that imposter syndrome, wanting to almost cancel. I'm sure we've all kind of been in a similar situation of wanting to just cancel something because it's just gotten too much. Physically, those mental sort of symptoms are also coming out physically, and then now you've been able to, I guess, problem solve in terms of being able to know what works for you. So being able to do the massages, giving yourself a nice face mask, and just breathing exercises, and then coming out on the other end. And that is it's something that I've discovered for myself as well, in terms of utilizing breathing techniques. And the one thing I loved everything, but the one thing that really stood out of what you just said is the aftermath, giving yourself a pat on the back. Okay, I think we need to try and not put too much emphasis on relying on other people to give us that validation or to give us that pat on the back. Get it from yourself, whether that's physically patting yourself on the back. I'll tell you one thing that I used to, and I still do it, to be honest. I think I got it from a movie or show that I was watching. But I have a bunch of post-it notes on my mirror, on my wall, of just messages of me saying, well done, Jenny, oh, you got through this, and just affirmations. Because it got me into the habit, like I said, of not relying on other people to tell me well done. And sometimes you might expect that, let's say in the work setting, from your boss. You work so hard on a presentation, or you've worked so hard on a report that you're writing, and you send it off and it's like, okay, thanks. And obviously you never know what's going through that person's mind, but I think if you're somebody that values validation, make sure that it comes from yourself. Okay, so you're not relying on other people. So that was such a wonderful story, and I'm sure it's resonated with everyone there. And you've kind of answered my next question, was around strategies. So I love that you use your own example. And I hope people can also take something from there as well. I'm not sure if there's any questions. Let me just check in the chat, so I want to make sure we don't miss out anything. But in the meantime, what is coming up? Chris, I see you all over LinkedIn. I see you're speaking everywhere. There's always something. So I know you've got a few things to let us know. What is coming up? I think the next slide will have your details. Okay, could please move on to the next slide. But what is coming up for you as a person in terms of maybe career-wise? What's coming up for Soul Stride as well? That people should know about.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's been an extraordinary year, Jenny. I've got to tell you. I mean, Soul Stride has become a really fun endeavor. It's growing. I as a 54-year-old man who lost everything, who essentially arrived back in the UK penniless, I live in a room on my own. I very rarely see anybody apart from online. I spend about 95% of the time on my own, and I live in a house with 6 other people, and it's a madhouse of other people from all over the world. And it's been one of the best experiences I've actually had was moving out of a situation where I was living on my own because I felt like I was too old to house share or flat share, right? And I found myself in this room, and I've now been here for almost 3 years. And it's not been without its challenges, but I'll be honest with you, it has become my safe haven.
Yeah.
And you know, the just knowing that there are other warm bodies in the same building gives me a sense of belonging in itself, right? But even from this room, I've been able to accomplish a great deal. And some of the highlights this year, obviously, will be the keynote, the the published article that I wrote for the Voice newspaper,
Yes.
which was such a great piece. The podcasts, it's countless. But yesterday, Jenny, could well be the big next thing, because I tell you what I did. I submitted my application for a Churchill Fellowship yesterday.
Amazing.
I know. And trust me, when I started to look at this in early September, actually, I started to look at this time last year, but I felt I was never ready for it last year. But I got into the a process early this year, and even right up until Sunday, I was not going to do it because I felt like
Mm,
there was no way a black man of my age who's not working full time, who's unemployed, living in a room, what possibly could I add value to the Churchill Fellowship when I look at all the folks with MBE, OBE, and all these really sort of really high status people. And then
mm.
I started to go through the application form, and yesterday I submitted it at 5:29 p.m.
Amazing.
And I have to say, I slept very well last night, knowing that I had done it. And
Ah,
you know,
I'm super happy.
it's one of 3 stages. I won't actually get to know if I'm one of the 110 awarded fellows until next June. So there are many steps between
Okay.
now and then. But the fact is that a year ago I would have never considered it. But it tells
Mm,
me that this has been a breakthrough year, and it's
yeah.
amazing what you can accomplish if you have hope, if you've made a decision that you want to do something, you've got some passion and you've got some good skills, make full use of them, and try and try and find something that gives you some purpose and enjoyment. And that's what I endeavor to do. Not always successful, but I endeavor to do
No,
that.
I love that for you, Chris, and it reminds me of a quote that I guess I've stolen. I don't know where I got it from, but it's speak even though your voice shakes, and do even though you're scared. And
Yes,
this is something, like you said, you've been thinking about for a while, and I'm sure it
yes,
can apply to so many things, and I'm sure people can relate where they're umming and ahhing about applying for something or asking, I don't know, for a raise, or just doing something that scares them.
yeah,
Just the act of actually doing that is a breakthrough,
yes,
regardless of what the outcome is.
exactly.
So that's a wonderful message, and all the best with
Thank
that.
you, thank you.
Amazing. So this is your these are the contact details for you. Of course, I
Yeah,
mean, I hope you're happy for people to shoot you a message.
yeah.
And
LinkedIn
like
is
I
always
said,
the best way. Yeah,
have a look at Chris's LinkedIn. Again, I could spend hours just looking through and all the articles that you've been a part of and the
yeah,
videos. Like, you are definitely someone who is extraordinary, but also you do the work.
yeah.
You actually do the work, and you're part of a lot of these initiatives.
Yes.
And thank you so much for sharing your story, for being open, and also for just giving some tips. And I know it's based on your own experience, of course. But it's definitely inspiring, even for me as well. So thank you so much
You're
for
very
that.
welcome, Jenny. It's been a
Appreciate it.
great pleasure talking with you this evening.
Thank you so much. So we will be going on to our next bit very shortly. If you could go to the next slide, please. And based on the conversations that we've just had with Chris, and even earlier on at the start of this presentation, I'd love for you to think about a wellness strategy that you've implemented to help work, balance work and life. And the next slide will go through an acronym. I guess we're using a lot of acronyms today. And this is something, again, that I've seen online, and it's called balance. As you know, that's sort of the topic that we are talking about today. And it's an acronym that you can use to reflect on maintaining your well-being amidst all the demands of our careers. So the first one is boundaries. So remembering to set clear boundaries is crucial. Setting boundaries between you and your colleagues, you and your work as well. So earlier on, I asked a question about, you know, whether you skip lunches or you skip your breaks. That's a boundary that you have to have with yourself. And I think a lot of people forget that. It's not just boundaries with other people, but also with yourself. And just ensuring that you have dedicated time to recharge. The next bit is awareness. So being aware of your mental health and physical health. So that is maybe through reflecting, checking in regularly with yourself, asking yourself the question, how are you feeling today? Practicing mindfulness, as you know, Chris has mentioned in the story, breathing exercises, journaling as well is something that's quite popular and is very helpful. Meditation, all of these type of things and ways of, I guess, self-soothing can help maintain this type of awareness. L is for leisure. So prioritizing leisure activities that rejuvenate you. Life isn't just about working, and I understand in this climate, and depending on your situation, at times it's easier said than done. But if you can prioritize certain leisure activities, whether that's to read, watching a Netflix show, hiking, just a favorite hobby that you enjoy, and making sure you carve out the time to do these activities into your schedule. So if you're a planner like me, I've got a digital calendar. I literally schedule in leisure time. So I might schedule in time for me to go for a walk, listen to some music, watch TV. So make sure you're prioritizing that. A is asking for help. So remembering that it's okay to ask for help, whether that's talking to a mentor, a colleague, reaching out to a friend when you're feeling overwhelmed, just sharing that part of you, sharing with somebody else, and seeking support is not a sign of weakness, but it's actually a sign of strength. And like I said, you're not the only person that's going through this. You might be the only person in your group, in your circle, that's speaking up, but be assured that there are other people who might be going through a similar situation as well. N is for nourish. So focusing on nourishing your body with balanced meals and staying hydrated. Like I said, your mental well-being impacts your physical health. So simple practices like meal prepping can make healthier choices easier to maintain. Also, exercising as well is important to maintain your energy levels. C is for connect, so building those supportive relationships both at work and in your personal life, and engaging with colleagues and spending quality time with friends and family to foster those connections to support your mental health is also really important. And then the last bit is exercise. So again, there's also an emphasis on physical activity. So incorporating that into your daily routine, whether that's through workouts, yoga, walking, it's vital for reducing stress and improving your mood. So as we wrap up today's discussion, I encourage you to think about how some of these strategies that we've spoken about today can be implemented in your own life. I also encourage you to try them out. Not every strategy will work for you, because we're all different people. We all have different needs and we react to things differently as well. So just try it out. If it works, then that's fine. If it doesn't, go on to the next thing that might work for you. So thank you so much. I'd also love to invite you all, just in the next slide, to our healthcare chapter WhatsApp group, where I'll be sharing updates and other further events as well, not just events to do with BYP, but for example, some of the ones, let's say Chris might be involved in, that you might also want to be attending, and resources too. So please be sure to take a picture and join our WhatsApp group. And of course, BYP has a platform called Javelin, which is a career advancement platform for Black professionals. So that's on to the next slide. Do join Javelin. They have incredible resources on there that you can access. So thank you everyone who has attended. This presentation will be available, I believe, on the YouTube page as well. So you can always go back to, if you haven't made notes of all the wonderful gems. Thank you so much, Chris, that was mentioned today. And I hope that you've taken something that you can go back and reflect on, and that we do make sure we prioritize mental health and well-being in the workplace. Thank you so much.